Now I'm going to share my screen. Can you guys see Rhino? Hopefully.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Awesome. All right. I brought the chat box up. Hopefully I can keep my eye on that if somebody types something in. So again, I'm in Rhino here. Same demonstration file I had yesterday. This time what I did is I drew a little bit of a street block and sidewalk, and then a little bit of the sort of road surface over here. And that way, if I'm standing outside, then I have a little bit of ground here to sort of situate me in context. So again, instead of thinking about parallel and isometric views, we're going to set view and make sure that we're back in perspective. Okay. What that does is that lets us see, just like our eyes or our cameras. It's when we tilt this view so it looks like we're sort of at eye level, let's say at the street, right? Then it almost starts to feel like we're immersed inside the model. So I'm just sort of panning and tumbling around here. Tumble meaning sort of rotate. Again, when I have perspective on and I go to viewport properties, so I'm just going to the label and going to viewport properties. Over here in the properties, it shows my viewport properties. So it's telling me, okay, you're in perspective. Not a huge surprise since we just said that. But there are some camera parameters here that we can change. And lens length is always one of them that I'm wanting to change. A 50 millimeter is just a little too tight. As I said before, it's a little hard to sort of see things. So I'm going to adjust that down somewhere between 25 and 35 millimeter, maybe 30. I'll just sort of bridge the center there. And now you can see it sort of distorted my perspective a little more, right? But at the same time, I can see a lot more. It's sort of a wider angle, right? And so let's say I was thinking about, what does my entrance look like as I walk by, and how am I dressing up the streetscape along this major corridor, Las Vegas Boulevard, right? This could be a sort of perspective that allows me to sort of, lay those things out, maybe put some different patterns, pavement patterns on the ground plane, add trees and street furnishings, then start to give materiality to the outside and start to show people walking by and walking in and people moving around maybe up here or something like that, right? Obviously, this is just a planar composition, so it's a little more abstract than a sort of open and shut case of, here's a building and here's the inside and here's the outside, right? So we're still sort of getting there right now, and we're sort of stepping back from that. What we're doing is we're going to use these perspectives to sort of mine the sort of spatial sequence and spatial and light opportunities inside some of our planar compositions, right? And then we can, once we get inside of these things and we start to understand how they work, then we can begin to sort of use those strategies in our current massing model, right, in Studio. So the massings are just these sort of boxes or blocks that are being stacked around and moved around and slid around back and forth as you try to sort of understand the ordering and organization of the building. But ultimately, where floor slabs are and where walls are and where roofs are and ceilings and openings and windows and things like that have yet to be determined, right? And so, you can build up that sort of repertoire of how do you make an opening? How do you bring in light from above? How do you make a procession, right? Or some sort of meaningful spatial sequence from, let's say, entering and then moving up into the atrium and then up into the galleries and on, right? So it's those sort of cues, the sort of special things that we can start to glean, I think, from these models and start to see what we have, all right? So I'm just going to sample a few cases here in Rhino with those. So right now I'm just going to come in here and I'm just going to pretend I'm on the street. So man on the street here. And maybe I'll sample this. All right, so let's see, I have 30 millimeter lens. All right, so I'm just going to go to, oh goodness, what the heck is that? Yeah, don't do that. Let me go to rendered mode. There we go. All right. And I'm going to go to my render settings. I'm going to check a few things. First of all, this is set just to, I'm not going to worry about this stuff. I have a transparent background on. Go ahead and set that. going to turn my ground plane off since I made my own ground plane. I don't really want to worry about anything else. Again, we can talk about sun versus sky. If I turn on the sun, right, I can start to see I have crisper shadows depending on where that sun is located. And I can always open this up and change the location of the sun, and then you can start to see those shadows move. Maybe. No, come on. Don't think about it. Just let me move it. Sorry. See the blue spinning wheel of my cursor has become. All right. Okay, manual control, or I can just change the date and the time, right? So this is noon. Let's say I change it toward morning, right? Or come back to noon and then change it to afternoon and then into the evening, golden hour. All right. Okay, so we can do several things here when it comes to shadows. And again, I want to make sure the skylight's on so I get some of that diffuse light sort of bouncing around. What that does, that simulates, the bouncing of particles and the sort of ambient light that we get in the atmosphere, both as a sort of dome, and then the stuff that sort of, is bouncing off of all the surfaces that we see. Okay, so I'm just double checking these. Nothing really out of the ordinary here. Maybe I'll leave the sun on. Why not? This is at January. All right. Whatever. And so once I have that set, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and capture this. Yeah, why not? Capture the file. It's going to say, okay, you want the transparent background? Yes, no. You sure you want this current viewport? Do you want to change the viewport? No, I'm good. I can change the scale, right? So the number of pixels that I have in this. So the resolution right now is going to be pretty large, 8,232 by 4,300 pixels. That's pretty big. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that at okay. You can always look at the size and then compare later. So I'm going to say render capture 02. I did one yesterday that was 01. Okay. And you know what? I'm going to let that happen. It's taking a few minutes because it's got to calculate maybe some more pixels than it's actually showing on the screen at the moment. So about 4 times as many. Twice in this direction, twice in this direction. Sort of exponentially grows, sort of doubles. So give it just a second here. I should probably restart my computer at some point too. It's probably been like a month or two since I've done that. Okay. And look at this. It said render capture 02.jpg. Remember the mistake I made yesterday? I saved it as a JPEG, and with the transparent background, it turned the transparent background to black because JPEGs don't do that. So I got to do this again. But at least I realized it before I left Rhino. I should know better. I'm going to hit OK. And I'm going to change the safe type file, save as type PNG. Render, let's see, what would we call this? Render capture. Ugh, really? Come on. Render capture 02. And apparently I changed this to a TIFF. I'm going to change it to PNG. And I'm hit save. TIFF's an interesting one. There's nothing wrong with TIFF file formats. I think they preserve alpha channels or transparencies. They're called a lossless file image. And so that's each time you save it, it's not trying to compress the image. And so you don't lose any quality. JPEGs, one of the reasons they're so often used is because what they do is they're a really efficient way of storing photos. They'll look at contiguous pixels that are similar to the ones, and sort of try to group things together and simplify some of the image where it can without losing too much quality. So here, give it just a second here. Let's wait for this to finally capture. It's taking a while when it starts to drag its feet like this. Okay. I'm going to do maybe one more, and let's go into the inside, because I think that's where we really have to be careful about our camera angle, so we can sort of understand and see and still feel like we're inside this thing wherever we're standing here. easier said than done. Let's see how we get inside this. Maybe I go in here. So I'm standing on maybe this platform, looking at all these other floating planes around me and above me and below me. Oh, there we go. Probably just zoomed out a little, or zoomed in a little too much. I'll probably zoom out a little too much. Okay. Ah, here we are. All right, here's something. You know what? Sort of real-time renderings really kind of got me down here. Let's just go to shaded. Be a little easier to tumble around here. Okay. So in this case, I'm very much going to change my camera angle, my lens length. Viewport properties, I'm going to go wide angle here. Instead of 30, I'm going to go 20. Let's see. Now I can start to see more on the inside here. Yeah. Okay, now I'm going to go back to rendering once I sort of have a place here. And again, I can go to the render settings. I can change that sun. I'm going to save this file real quick just in case I have to get back in here. Okay, turn the sun settings on. And let's see what this looks like in June-ish. All right. In the afternoon or something, right? Ooh, there's some bright spots, that's for sure. Okay, now let's see here. Try to find something halfway compelling. Easier said than done, because I didn't use as many planes as you guys did. So when I did this little demo model, so I don't have nearly as many planes in mine as yours. I'll just do this, let's say. Why not? Let me turn the sun off for just a moment. Let's see what that looks like. I hit OK. Let's turn the sun off for a moment. Turn this back on. Kind of like it just a little darker. Turn the sun back on and see what it looks like. Okay, I'll do that. Just turn down the intensity a little bit. And that way, this shadow is kind of a buzzkill. It's kind of lame. But we could always try to take care of that in Photoshop afterwards. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and take this one really quickly. Yeah, I'll do that. File, view, capture to file. You know what, I'm gonna turn the scale back to 1. This is quite a big viewport I have going on here, so. There we go, hit OK. That way I have less to deal with here. Render, capture, 03. All right. So I'm just going through, and again, this is something that I'm going to have you guys do first thing over this evening, is to really go through some of your models. You can't do that, you can't possibly do that right now. Maybe you're doing one just to get something that you can work with in Photoshop right now. But I would like you to do is to sort of look for some of these spatial moments, right? You know, when it comes to, let's say, looking on the inside, right? If I just look at this for a moment, it looks like I have some sort of space over here that's larger. Maybe it's a window. Maybe I can imagine more building over here. It looks like I have a window that, you know, frames a particular thing. Maybe I put the stratosphere right here, since this is a sort of tall thing. Maybe I'm purposely framing some part of the skyline of the strip or something, you know. And you know, the vertical part of this is part of this is a feature, not a bug. You know, it's purposeful. You know, maybe you know, I have some greenery and like an atrium with some trees growing in it down here, just off of this ledge, but down further. So I can start to give this a little height and scale here. Maybe I can put some railing and some folks up here. You know, so I'm just sort of thinking out loud, you know, what are some of the spatial opportunities here? The other thing is that this casts a shadow, and this is sort of projecting a bright spot right here, this opening. And so, if I was thinking about that, maybe I look at the year and the days and sort of see how the shadows and the light sort of come in from that window. And then maybe I could do something special on the floor, like a sundial, or maybe it's about, I don't know. There's lots of different ways to sort of think about this. Maybe it's about having the sun right here. And so I turn on the grasshopper file, right? And sort of look at the position of the sun until it sits right here, right? And I put a chair right here, and then, on March 21st and September 21st, everybody takes turns sitting in the chair, at solar noon or something, to sort of witness this sort of alignment of the, I don't know, whatever, but you can have fun with this, in other words, right? It could be kind of interesting to sort of see, again, if you have an opportunity where you have sort of a closed off area, but then you have gaps up above you in the ceiling, to sort of understand how light sort of washes down across the wall, right? So if you think about, a ceiling and a roof and a wall sort of meaning like this, and then you slide the ceiling back just a little bit and extend the wall past just a little bit, right? Then suddenly you can start to bounce light in and sort of let the bright stuff wash the wall and illuminate the wall, right? And then if you put water along the wall, well, I don't know, whatever, you can start to imagine, right? Maybe that's a place where you can actually do a green wall and have a little bit of a vertical garden, right? Or maybe it's about, having that sort of stark concrete. And then you watch the sort of shape of the sort of bright spot, the glare and the shadow sort of move across the wall, right? So you can begin to sort of snapshot these things if you want, using that sun tool. And then the question is, how do we dress it up and how do we talk about it and how do we show it, through perspective, right? So anyway, I have a couple here that I can work on in Photoshop. And so that's good enough for my purposes today and tomorrow, right? I'm gonna go ahead and save this, and I'm gonna try to close Rhino down now. All right, just say, no, I don't wanna update. I'm really hesitant when I'm teaching classes to update certain softwares, Rhino and Revit and those sorts of things, and Creative Cloud, because I don't want something to break and then suddenly I don't have a software to use for a class, and that always leads to pretty awkward situations. So it's probably on like Surface Pack 30 to download, and I'm on like Surface Pack 2, and I probably should load the update at some point, but there's never a good time. I'm gonna go ahead and shut down Windows so we're not worried about that. Okay, and so yesterday, related to the ground plane, I started thinking about, our sort of urban context. There's lots of different ways you can begin to think about that sort of urban surface, right? The ground plane. And honestly, when it comes to urban areas, right, the ground plane is so important, right? I mean, what you do at that pedestrian scale, right? Just 6 inches away from the cars driving along the street, super important, right? Trees providing shade, amenities, and furnishings like trash cans so that people have places to throw the trash away and you don't get litter on the streets. Benches, if it's appropriate. Lights, for safety and etc. Right? And how you begin to deploy these things in order to sort of create shade, or to add ambiance, or to create sort of protection or a buffer zone between pedestrians and cars along the street, and those sorts of things. Those are all urban design moves I think we really should own as architects and think about, right? And so it's also ways to sort of, again, show people where the entrance is, frame people, funnel people in to your site if you'd like to. You can play those games. You can actually change up the materials on the ground plane, right? And create these sort of thresholds as you're walking along the street, right? You can start to create your own. You can always sort of go, when you travel, right? You sort of like, I'm thinking of, various districts, neighborhoods, or enclaves in metropolitan areas in large cities, right? Sometimes, you'll have like the old pavers, or you'll have, the cobblestone streets, or, you'll have parts of where, you have, you still see the brick, along the streets or the sidewalks or pavement. So it's those sorts of things, right? You can begin to change those up, and you can even think of them as districts, right? If you think about, sort of Las Vegas Boulevard as a corridor, and you think about, or maybe the area around that sort of Fremont Street corridor on either side, Ogden and on Carson on our side, right? As this sort of, district of where where you have sort of Fremont Street experience and Fremont East, and so you have a sort of weird mix of sort of Zappos and other places, other people that work downtown or maybe even live downtown, and then the touristy areas. Then you could always begin to think about how to make those areas better, right? It's kind of interesting that they started fixing up those neon signs and redeploying them along certain areas. So you could always think about doing that too, right? We could always find an old neon sign and Photoshop that in if you want it to, right? Sort of, again, sort of give it a sense of place, right? Saying this is Las Vegas, and right, this is not, downtown LA, and it's not downtown San Antonio, right? Downtown LA is very specific. Downtown San Antonio is very specific. It has that river walk, right? This, downtown Las Vegas is different. It's the way it is, right? So, you can always try to give it that sense of place and really sort of place it within the context and sort of tell a little bit about how you can appreciate and then recognize and then work within, a particular area or place. I was just going around and trying to find some, examples of sort of paving blocks and sort of patterns. So I pulled off this one. I was also starting to look at some street furnishings. Maybe we can look at that, and just taking it and sort of trying to tie all these together to make something larger, and to do it in a staggered way. And then, at some point we probably need to come in here and very, very closely. I'm just going to draw a box here. Right, just making a selection area that I can. So now when I use my paint brush and I change the color to black, I can just paint a black line. Let's see here. Right along here, right inside that selection area. Make a nice seam there. There we are. Just add my own seams where I need them. But I'm just tying these together to make something larger so that I can actually extend along the sidewalk. And once I have that, I can go ahead and crop this. Right? So again, I was just copying and pasting. All right, let me just open up the original here so I can show you what I did there. There we are. All right, so here's the original sometime today. Oh, I see what I did. I actually took the original, I made the canvas larger and I just started copying and pasting it in. So let me just resave it here. Save as. In the textures. All right. I'll just open that one up. So you can see where I started and I can just go through a few steps here. So again, I'm thinking about, let me just back up and again, let's just talk about yesterday's sort of quick demo. Wherever I put it. Probably on my desktop, huh? PSD, there we go. Right, so we were just quickly sort of placing this stuff in and putting this in a sort of weird landscape, and we haven't even done anything with the background to sort of solve some of that problem, where we have this sort of false horizon. But this idea of having to do color correction, trying to worry about sort of foreground, we still need to sort of smooth out some of these seams, adjust the coloration. It's a little too neon up here and a little less neon down here. So we'd want to desaturate this area. It seems like our Dodge Burn tool was light brightening and darkening. And as a result, it was sort of changing the coloration a little bit. So we'd want to adjust that as we go. Probably add some more shadows, soft shadows for these trees and things like that, and on and on, and add figures and start to describe scale and figure out where we would crop this. Probably don't need all of this, right? So we built this up layer by layer. We have a tree, we have the wood patternings, we have the concrete textures that are here, we have that are more or less subtle. We have plantings, shrubbery, grasses. Oh, we had a ground plane we were going to use that I started to tile together, right? But we decided not to use it, right? We have our rendering from Rhino. We have another tree, and we have the sky that we brought in, right? All stuff that I just found online and started clipping out and copying and pasting. And the idea is that we're creating a collage, right? creating a collage and embracing the fact that it's not quite photorealistic. And, maybe we stylize things further. Maybe the trees and the grass, maybe that's what I don't want to stick out. Maybe I start to desaturate those further, right? So maybe I select that layer and go again to image pull down adjustments, right? So we used edit pull down transform, and we used image pull down adjustments quite a lot, right? So if I go to hue saturation, right? Hue meaning color value, saturation meaning the amount of color. So if I start to desaturate it more, start to turn it grayer and grayer until it becomes black and white or grayscale. Right, I can do just a little bit of olive in there, maybe a little bit of golds. Same with, let's see, try to find my ground plane. Here's the grass ground plane, right? I still need to clone stamp some of this. Let's see here, grass. We'll do the same thing here. I'm going to try to figure out take out some of that greenness, right? Maybe it starts to look more like grass in the desert. It's going to be a little browner and drier, not quite so neon and lush. Right, so we can begin to adjust these things, and really it's about sort of nuance and crafting once you get the big pieces in place, right? So I took this pattern, for instance, like say for the ground, and again I can double click this and sort of turn this locked background layer into just a regular old layer, right? That I can turn on or off. When I turn that layer off, you can see I just have a transparent nothing document, right? And then just zoom out. Control plus and control minus and control 0 work the same way for zooming in, zooming out, and fitting the screen, just like in Illustrator. They're both Adobe products. They work very similarly. In this case, if I want to change the size of the image that I'm working in, the canvas, I can go to Image, pull down, and go to Canvas size, right? I'm just going to say, okay, right now your canvas, its width is 3.813 inches, and its height is 1.2 inches. What would you like it to be? And as I enlarge it, do you want me to enlarge, out from the center, or do you want me to enlarge out from the top left-hand corner? Or, so I'm going to go from the top left-hand corner. I'm just going to say, I think I did this one like 20 inches by 10 inches. I just made the document larger, right? When I do that, you can still see now I've made this significantly larger, right? Here's my original image size. Now I have all this. So if I copy and paste this in a couple of times, I can begin to style these together. Maybe I, at this point, I take all 4 of these and I merge them, right? I right click and merge them, and then I can copy and paste them. And like now down here, maybe I try to stagger them, so you don't just get like a complete repeat sort of situation. Just try to move these over a little more. Yeah, something like that, maybe. And let's see here. Again, I'm just going to try to not repeat this one more time. Let's see what happens here. Where things align and don't align, kind of a goofy thing here, but yeah, it is what it is, I suppose. All right. I'm just going to do this, and I'm going to come back in and put that one in. Again, I'm just sort of pasting again these copies, just sort of filling this back out until I have a strip of pavers I can start to play around with here. Right, then maybe this is too big. I don't need that much width. I'm just going to go ahead and crop this. Okay, that crop tool is right here. I can just sort of fit the handles to it and hit enter. Now I've cropped it. And again, I'm just going to touch up some of these lateral seams, or what look like the goofiest here. I'm just going to try to make a little thin thing there. I'm just going to paint in, use my paintbrush tool. It doesn't really matter at this point. I'm just going to make it large. And I made this sort of selection box. It's just really thin, really short, right, and long. And I'm just going to sort of paint the inside of that box. You can see there. And do the same thing here. try to get something really super skinny. Yay. There we go. Maybe that's good enough. Might be a little too wide for my taste, but you know, it's okay. I'll live. All right, there we are. Last but not least, I'll probably take all these layers and I'll just flatten them together, merge them. And I'm gonna, you know what I didn't do though? Let's go ahead and open up one of those test renderings I just made or I just captured. So I'm gonna go ahead and open in Photoshop. Let's go ahead and bring that in. Let's see, desktop, render capture 02, that was this one. Yeah, let's go ahead and bring that one in. All right, okay, so there it is. Oh, it's glory. Okay, a couple of things I want to think about, right? One is, well, first of all, there's a lot of things, right? You know, finding a suitable backdrop, right? And then trying to sort of, you know, again, come up with some textures that I can begin to apply to some of these surfaces, right? And so, you know, before I use some concretes and some woods, maybe I'll do that this time around as well, just use those. I'll maybe try to use this paving pattern for the ground over here. Okay, so why don't I try that since I have this? Go ahead and select all, Control A, copy, Control C, and then I'm going to go back in here and paste, Control V, right? And so we start to just build this up layer by layer. And we just, as we can paste things in, they come in their own layers. So this first one, layer one, I'm going to call it base rendering. Yeah, that's a good one to call it. And then for this, I'm going to say paving pattern, something like that. Always good to have it to try to get into to sort of, you know, label these things as I mentioned before. All right, and so a couple of things here. I'm going to transform this layer. I'm going to change its shape, right? And so first things first, maybe I just go to Edit, Transform. And the thing we did before to try to match the perspective was distort, right? Yeah. So really quickly, let's talk about this for just a moment. I'm going to get my annotate tools up on Zoom here, and let's do that perspective exercise that we did the other day. I'm just going to draw a couple of lines here, you know, with these parallel edges to sort of find where one of those vanishing points are. This is like sort of bordering on 1 point perspective. The second point perspective, the other point's way off the screen to the left. You can see that these things aren't quite parallel. And it's because we're looking down a sort of corridor, we're just, yeah, okay, so that looks like that point would be right there. That's kind of a nice looking point, isn't it? All right, so I'm just gonna leave that stuff up and leave that as a reference for my perspective here. Oh, one other thing I'm gonna do. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna bring that back up. Wasn't quite done. Just gonna draw another line. See this edge? That's where the edge of my sidewalk and the curb then steps down to the street. I'm going to go ahead and draw that so I can get that edge there. Now I know exactly what I can just, you know, draw this and distort this to, right? So I'm going to, again, draw this out and extend it all the way to the edge there. All right, look at that. I might even take this and move this off to there. There we are. So that's just my Zoom tools. And I'm just sort of, you know, trying to be as careful as possible when it comes to sort of approximating the perspectival projection here, right? Looking at this vanishing point, and it's going to match up with it. Okay, so I have this paving pattern layer selected in my layers box, and I'm going to go to Edit, go to Transform. I'm going to go to Distort, and it's going to look really weird for a while because I'm going to turn this corner over here. I'm going to put this vertex over here, and then this one over here, and then this one way over there. All right. Now I'm not going to go that far with it, so maybe I'll just go this far with it for right now. I'm just going to make sure that I'm really getting in there. Just trying to match up the perspective a bit there. Okay, so there we have it. And again, I can go to this paving pattern it's sort of, it's looks kind of a little stupid, right? Because it's like the only thing that's like photorealistic. And so it really sticks out in a really weird way. I can turn this into an overlay layer where it just becomes sort of, a suggestion of a pattern, right? Okay, so that's one way of looking at this. We'll use this with the concrete and things like that. Now, I'm kind of curious, right? There's the luminos. Not too keen about any of these, to be honest, at the moment. Linear burn, multiply, darken. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn its opacity down a bit, tone it down, and let's see what this looks like. Maybe multiply or darken, give it some more shadow there. Right. Again, I can always up that opacity again if I need to, right? Sort of find that sweet spot as I go along. I might need to continue to adjust things. And that's why it helps to keep these layers labeled so that you know what to drag which ones up or down, or to select which ones and turn the opacity up or down, or turn them on or off, or lock them. Right. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and that was just using the annotate tools and zoom. These red lines, I'm going to go ahead and clear those out. Yeah, they are. All right, so now I've actually made a little bit of a ground plane here. Right. Should we maybe put in a tree or two? Let's put in like a street tree. I actually have one, remember from yesterday. That let's see, it's in, okay, here we go. No, downloads, there we are. Downloads, textures. And let's take a look at these icons. So these are the things that we were downloading. And I'm happy to share these in a folder if you'd like, but I highly encourage you to sort of look for your own as well. Right, this one's not too bad. I'll go ahead and open this one up. It looks like it already said that transparent background in it. So I'm going to go ahead and select all. So Control A, then copy, Control C. And I'm going to go back to here and I'm going to load that layer in just like that. Okay, I'm going to move it around until I have it in a spot here where I can, maybe I want to put a few trees, and I'm just going to enlarge that. Again, I want to transform it. So I'm going to hit Control T or Command T if you're using a Mac like me, Command T. I'm just going to pump that in there. Put it right there. I'm going to put another one back here, maybe somewhere. Not this one. But what you can see is that I want this to be on top of this pavement. I might even make a small bed here for it to sort of sit in, right? Where I pop a couple of pavers out and create a little sort of bed with some mulch around it or something. But I need to clip out the part of the tree that would be occluded from the building, right? So this part of the building that's cantilevering out would be in front of this tree, right? If you look at this ground plane. And so I need to sort of resolve that. If I move this back behind the base rendering, it's going to be back behind the ground plane as well. And that would be no good. So that's one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to move this tree in just like that, put it on top of the paving pattern on top of the ground. I'm just going to clip things out. So again, I'm going to take and draw the outline of this building, right? So I'm going to go ahead and turn the tree off for just a moment. Okay. And the easiest way to draw a sort of shape if I have a bunch of hard edges is, again, instead of, I can use the polygonal lasso tool here. I can click and hold, find that polygonal lasso tool. Now let me go around and snap and draw a shape, right? So I'm just going to zoom in so I can do this kind of carefully. I'll try my best to be a sort of Photoshop ninja here, sort of bitsmith, and take my time and actually do a good job of going around. So I'm just going around and drawing a shape around the part of this building that should be in front of the tree. All right. Using my keyboard, right, I can hold down the space key on my keyboard and then I can click and pan, can zoom in and out using Control plus, Control minus. Okay, I think that's good enough. I'm just gonna go around here and I'm gonna come back. And there's a shape, right? So that's around the building. And now if I turn on my tree and I make the tree layer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all the portions of the tree that are inside the selection, right? So I make sure that I have my selection set, I have the tree layer turned on, I'm going to hit delete, right? Now my tree will look like it disappears behind the building. Okay. It's a little nice to do. There we are. That tree again looks super out of place now. And so I'm going to go ahead and do some color adjustments. So remember before, to get the transform tools, it's the edit pull down transform, right? Image, pull down, adjustments, and we can do all kinds of things. Brightness and contrast, levels, curves, exposure. Let's take a look at some of these, okay? Brightness and contrast, right? It'll bring up a box, looks like this. I can turn down the brightness or turn it up. I can turn the contrast up or down. More contrast between the brights and the darks or less. Just leave that as is. I can just set it back to 0. And turn the brightness down a little bit, darken that up, right? Okay, so back to an image pull down adjustments, right? That was brightness and contrast. Exposure, similar, right? With exposure, I can turn on, basically the brightness or darkness, right? How much light was let in, let's say, to the camera. Let's turn that back to 0. And then offset and gamma correction have to do with how sharp the image is and how much contrast you have. So you can sort of wash out the contrast, right? Gray it out. Gamma correction will help things sort of pop when it comes to contrast or not. Right. Okay. Well, okay. All right. There we are. Adjustments, hue, saturation. I can take out some of that green. There we are. Right. Already we're starting to sort of tone down that tree. So it just looks like part of the streetscape somewhere beyond. It's not the first thing that pops into our eyeballs and gets burned into our retinas like it was before. Okay, paving pattern layer. I'm going to try this out. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to use my dodge and burn tool here, right? Okay, so I'm going to turn on my paving pattern. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use my brush, and instead of painting with a color like I was doing before with that black to create those lines, I'm going to use the dodge and burn tool brushes. Instead, I'm just going to click here. It looks like this sort of hand. Okay, it's called burn. And what that's going to do is it's going to let me make a brush, and it's going to let me darken that layer by applying brush strokes, right? So I'm going to undo that. So that's not so good looking, right? Okay. Or conversely, I could actually paint with black, right? So in this case, I go to my paintbrush. And I could add a new layer here, add new layer. I'll call this shadows. And then I could turn that shadow down something lighter, right? That's actually not a very good shadow. That's pathetic, actually. I'm embarrassed to even have that on my screen. Another way we could do that, especially if we were thinking about sort of ray tracing the sun. So I could, again, this is the tree, right? Is I could duplicate this layer, right? So I'm right clicking on the layer and I can say, let's make a copy of it, duplicate it, right? It's gonna say, okay, tree copied. I'm gonna say, yeah, let's call it tree shadow instead. All right, there we go, tree shadow. All right, now I'm going to take that tree shadow. I'm gonna go to edit, transform, right? Here we can scale, we use the distort. Let's say flip vertically. I'm gonna move it down. And then I'm gonna use distort to sort of zoom out here. And I'm just going to stretch this out a bit, sort of project some of the shadow. Looks actually like it should be projecting this way. All right. Okay, and now that shadow, first of all, we need to turn its brightness down all the way. So it just turns to black. And then we can adjust its opacity. So that becomes a little soft shadow. We can do that with human figures as well, right? Silhouettes and things like that. All right. So there's lots of different ways you could either paintbrush shadows, or you could project and cast the actual image and then distort it based off of the projection of the sun, and again, sort of cast a shadow on the ground, right? It's little subtle things like that that help sort of trick the eye into sort of believing some things are a little more real than they are, right? Another way of doing that would be to think about, putting some scale figures in here. Again, let me just go ahead and bring a couple of them up. I'll just find some scale figures really quickly. Let me, oh, you know what I can do? I'll just do this. I'll show you a couple of tricks you can use back and forth between Illustrator and Photoshop. Let me bring up Illustrator because I have some silhouettes in Illustrator, right? You guys do, right? So we all do. So let's talk about that, right? But again, I'm just sort of fearlessly at first, not even that good at it. I'm still not good at it, right? But I'm still just sort of being fearless and sort of trying to just layer things in here, right? And I can always go back and try to fine tune and adjust them later. Groups of people silhouettes, do some people silhouettes. All right, look at that. Now we could have some people actually kung fu fighting, but I don't think that'd be weird. Let's have a few folks like this really quickly. There we are. Okay, I just copied and pasted, copied in Illustrator, and I'm in Photoshop and I pasted. It says, do you want to paste as a smart object, pixels, path, the layer? Let's say smart object really quickly and hit OK. Now what I can do is I can scale them up a bit. Where'd they go? Oh, sorry, it's saying waiting for libraries. Now they're these sort of smart objects. I don't know what the smart objects actually did. Let's see here. What is it doing? What are you doing, Photoshop? Well, you can always count on me to screw things up in front of you before you accidentally screw something up and have to wait around forever. But all right, waiting for libraries, waiting forever, it seems like. Maybe I'll just stop. Maybe I'll come and import these in some other way. And just shouldn't take this long. It's really ridiculous. La 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 la. I can also show you again, if you wanted to add more contrast here, we can do that on our layers and our building layer. So we can go back to our base rendering layer and we can adjust curves. We can adjust contrast. There's several different ways we can do it. I just wanted to show you guys that as well. So while this is working, what I do want to say is that between now and tomorrow morning, I'd like for each of you to start to go through and start to capture some interesting perspectives in some of your planar compositions, and to think about how you situate the camera wherever you're at, on the streets or on the ground or up on one of these floors or layers or planes that you have up in the air, sort of at eye level, right? So we're not just looking down at it like we're in a helicopter floating above everything, right? But eye level perspective, right? So experiential, right? As if we're immersed within the scene itself, okay? Bring them into Photoshop, right? And just start, right? Just again, just what you do is you have all these layers and you can turn them on or off. And what I recommend doing is just sort of saving as a PSD file, right? That sort of it'll initially sort of steer you in that direction. I'll want to save it as a PSD file. It's called a Photoshop document. Preserves all those layers so you can open them up and keep editing them, right? Okay. I want you to capture 3 different perspectives for right now, just for tomorrow. Just sort of find 3 different ones. Export them out as PNGs, bring them into Photoshop, and begin, okay? As soon as this ever finishes, hopefully, I'm looking to see if there's some other message box I'm missing here that, okay, I don't know why. Might just have to force quit Photoshop here. That's unfortunate, right? What is going on? This part's responsive, so I don't understand what the dealio is. Oh, it's really unfortunate. I wanted to go through again, making some of those overlay layers with concrete and wood. And I wanted to put some scale figures in here, and that would be sort of really, tree, trying to adjust some of the ground. Then, maybe we could try to find some suitable sort of urban background here, right, where we start to see maybe a little bit of sky, but maybe some neighboring buildings. And we can even get a Google Street View and see if we can get, find, try to capture just that, right? Why don't I do that? Let's see if I can match up and find parts of downtown Las Vegas here in Google Street View and see if that would actually be suitable or not. Maps.google.com. Where in the, let's see here. Bridger, Las Vegas Boulevard. It's right in here, right? No, Carson. There we go, right here. So let's see if we were standing right along there. Trying to match the perspective is always a hard thing, but this is looking downwards. This is looking further upwards. I wonder what would happen if I did this. I wonder what it'd look like. It might look terrible, right? I'm not going to mince words. Let's try it. I'm just going to take a screen capture of this. It's funny. I've never done this before. Interesting. Oh, wait, I'm still waiting on Photoshop. Really, Photoshop? Really? All right, at this point, I think I'm just going to force quit Photoshop. I'm not sure what it's doing, but it's not good. There. All right. I probably didn't save any of that, so that's great. Oh, look at that. It brought up, recovered. Oh, look at that. Nice. All right, so good enough for me anyway. I'll try this one more time. Oh, actually, you know what? Before I try that, let me save it. Save. And it's going to come up as you want to save it as format Photoshop? I'm going to say, yes, please. Go ahead and save that to my desktop. Hit save. All right, so save these as PSD files. What that'll do is that'll preserve all the layers down here so you can continue to edit it. I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer. I'm going to put it on at the very bottom. I'm going to call this backdrop. Let's see what happens when I, this could be a disaster. Let's see how awful or good this looks. It'll be really interesting. Desktop, well, what's going on here? Oh, okay, I see. It's got a list. Screen capture, right? 1034, yeah. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and select all, Control A, copy, Control C, right? And then paste, Control V. Now the resolution is going to be much different, but let's see what happens here when I transform this and scale it up a bit. Okay, yeah. Interesting. Right. So at a certain point, I might selectively sort of here, let's drown this out. Let's take some of that hue and saturation out. Let's lighten this up a bit so it's not like overwhelming. I might clear this out so I don't have street there. No photograph of street there and sort of have a hard edge. All right, let's go to the base rendering. Like I said before, I'm going to go to image adjustments, and we can go to levels, curves, and exposure. So let's go to levels first of all. Okay, it brings up a box like this where I can begin to determine how dark are the darks, how dark or light are the midgrounds, the midtones, and how bright are the highlights, right? So I can begin to adjust this and take the midtones and start to darken them, or take the darker parts, the shadows, start to darken those up to give it more crisp, right? I can do it globally here, make the darkers lighter, or make the lights darker. Okay. Go ahead and hit OK. Okay, that was image adjustments levels. I can do the same thing with curves. Curves is kind of interesting. What you do is you see a readout of like certain parts of the values of this thing. So if I go to, I believe it's this one, click and drag an image to modify the curve. So if I sample, let's say this part, and then I say I want to make all those parts darker or lighter, where I can do it. And then if I wanted to then take this part and make that brighter, right? Make the dark parts darker and the bright parts lighter, I could, right? So I can begin to adjust contrast in that way. Again, there's lots of nuanced ways to do this. I'm just going to hit cancel on those. Okay. But you can make them sharper, clearer, or fuzzier, or however you want, right? Sort of adjusting the contrast here and there in the other way. What else? Oh, people. All right, let's try this one more time. I'm just going to hit copy. All right, paste. This time I'm going to say shape layer. And move these up, and let's see, where are they? Oh, they're right here. Okay. So I'm going to, shapes, right? Let's see here. Maybe I turn them black instead of white.
Sorry, Josh, real quick. What does the shape layer do? What does that do? Does that just make it the small?
I don't know. It's just the shape, but what it's doing is it's remembering them as vectors. So I'm just going to try to see if I can take them and convert them to black paint bucket tool. There we go. Let's see if I can do that or not. It's not going to let me do that. Let me paste them back in again and do shape layer. No, they're still white. Paste one more time. Let's just use pixels maybe. See if that, okay. Now let's see if they're the right size and if they're not going to be too pixelated here. Those look a little pixelated to me, honestly. Okay, so let's talk about scale in our perspective here for a moment while we have these dudes standing here. All right, again, I'm going to come back to find my vanishing points here. So I have this one and this one. There's a vanishing point right there. Yep, that looks about right. So that's spot on. I have one and it goes way off here, off the screen, right? If I pulled these back, eventually, if I went far enough, they would converge. Why is my thing going off? Okay, sorry. Sound off on my phone. But what you can see here is that we do have, let me change my color. We do have sort of eye level right here, right? And so what I want to do is if all these folks are about the same height, they're all going to be around the same eye level. All right. And so what that means is that maybe I should paste these people in separately. Let me do that really quickly. There's the tree. I'm just going to turn that layer off and copy and paste one more time. Just do these separately. Copy, paste as pixels. Yeah, so now they'll actually be sort of pixels here. So I would situate his eye at eye level, right? Now, where he's at then, right, is where I situate the feet. All right. So this person would be over here. Let me do this again. I'll take this guy. Why not? I'll paste him in as pixels. And I'll adjust him. Now, again, I'm going to put him at eye level. And then let's say he's walking this way into the building, right? This person's closer to us in the foreground, walking this way. This one's further back in the midground, walking into the building, right? All right. Let's take these two dummies. All right, there we are. Paste them in. I don't know, maybe they're not dummies, maybe they're well adjusted, you know. I'll put them in way in the back there. Yeah. And, maybe I can turn them down so that, the further away they are, the lighter they are, then we can sort of see through them. They're not too overbearing, especially when you get this close. It doesn't hurt to see, it doesn't hurt to not cover up the architecture completely, right? I can always turn them down in brightness too if I don't like to see things through them. I can just turn them sort of grayer, right? All right, so let me just, again, I was just using the zoom annotate to, let me just clear that out, right? All right, now you can begin to see something with scale, right? So now it's starting to look a little more believable to me, right? Now, this is weird. There's like a weird threshold here that I didn't compensate for. This has no material in it yet, right? Let's go over that one more time, what I did with the concrete, right? So I went to, up here and I said something like Google, let's see, Photoshop, concrete, how about concrete texture, something like that, right? Go to images. You get more than you could ever care about. Go to tools and change the size and look for something that's larger and higher res, right? And so I found a few of them. I'll just go ahead and open up a couple of them that I found here. Do the same thing with some of the wood. Let's see, download. Here's my textures folder that I made. Let's look at these, right? So I have wood. I'll go ahead and open up wood, and I'll open up some of these white grunge and concrete stuff. Let's take a look at those. Hit OK. There we are. So I'm opening all of these up as separate files right now. Eventually, I'll look at some and copy and select them, copy and paste them into our other ones, right? There's some concrete. There's concrete. There's concrete. There's some. This one's kind of nice and textured. Let me go ahead and select all. Control A, copy. Control C. And then I'm going to go back to my render capture there, .psd. I'm going to paste in, Control V, right? All right, now, let's say this worked out really well and the scale actually looks kind of good. All right, going to go Control T, right? Transform. I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to scale it to sort of fit here along that surface that I'm going to deploy this on. I'm going to turn on its opacity so I can see, right? So I'm going to take this surface right here and I'm going to go ahead and use this as an overlay layer for it. So go ahead and look at that, multiply, darken, right? I'm going to set the linear burn. Linear burn looks kind of cool. I like that concrete actually, right? Now I just need to trim this out so that it's just working on this surface. And look, I actually want to put it on this surface as well. So maybe I put it on all of these surfaces, right back here. And so now I need to sort of like, repeat this pattern and then do some clone stamp in order to sort of smooth it out so you don't see these themes, and then trim it out really carefully, right? All right, so let's try that. So let me go ahead and duplicate this layer. Right, when I duplicate, it says, are you sure? I'm gonna say, yeah. I'm gonna move it down here. Looks a little darker there, doesn't it? Oh, I see. I see why, because it is darker up here. Interesting. And so let me see if I can rethink this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this. Let's see, edit, sorry, transform, and flip vertically. There we go. Now that'll match up a little better. Now I just need to worry about that seam here in just a minute. Let me go ahead and take these two, and I'm just going to merge them together. Again, I need to set them to linear burn. There we go. I'm gonna call this concrete concrete texture. I just need to add a little more over here for this one, right? Okay, so I'm just going to take this and I'm going to duplicate it one more time here. It's annoying that I have to keep duplicating it, but it is what it is. All right, that works. Okay, and so I'm going to take that, take these two things and merge them together. Each time I merge them, it turns off that overlay layer setting. So I just have to go back and turn it to a linear burn. Right, so now I have some concrete here. Yeah, look at that. That's kind of a nice concrete texture and didn't have to worry about all those shaders. Now I just need to sort of selectively trim this stuff out, right? So I'm going to go here and I'm going to go around again carefully, as carefully as I can. And select the portions that I think are going to be concrete here. This is just my preference, and I'm just sort of ad-libbing here, I guess, but just going around. All right. So now I've selected the parts where I want to keep this concrete layer. And so what I'm going to do is I have that selected. I want to select the opposite. I want to select everything outside of that and then delete all that concrete away that's still there, right? So I'm going to go select inverse, and invert the selection. Now you can see everything that was selected is not selected. Everything that wasn't selected is selected. I can hit delete, right? And now I just have concrete right there on those layers. Now I still have those seams I mentioned before. Yeah, I'm just going to use some clone stamp. I'm going to make sure that I have a decent sized brush here and that it's sort of feathered and soft, right? So it's sort of round and it has a sort of feathered, I mean, it's sort of a gradient, so it doesn't have a hard edge. Okay, and I'm just going to hit my option key and sample right there. I'm just going to lightly sort of flick, 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 flick. Try to take out that seam where it's showing up here. Right, just try to get rid of some of that seam there. Yeah, that's so bad. There we go. I messed up a little bit here. I guess I should have continued it on right here and I didn't. All right, so let's try that. Let's see if we can clone stamp that in. Clone stamp it in and ask for permission later. All right. Let's see if we can get that to work or not. Still looks like there's a seam there, and we would have to, again, trim this out. I'll go ahead and undo that. But you can see, right? Like, again, I'm not going to worry about trying to render a bunch of weird maps onto this thing. I'm gonna usually map this stuff in Photoshop after the fact, right? I'm just going to do the wood demonstration again as well. You know, because this has a direction to it. And so again, we'll be looking at the perspective pretty carefully, trying to make sure that we don't break the perspective, right? I really don't care for that color, but so let's look at this, right? I can go to hue saturation. In this case, I can colorize. I can give it maybe a darker, sort of walnut feel, maybe. There we go. Copy, right? Select all, Control A, copy, Control C. Now we'll go back here. Let's paste this in. All right, so what do we need to make wood? How about we make this surface? No, actually, let's make this surface here that sort of engages the concrete. Let's make that wood. Yeah, that'll work. That ought to work. Well, I'm going to turn down the opacity just so I can see the edges that I need to match this up with, okay? So I'm going to zoom in now, maybe. There we are. That's better. Okay, maybe not that quite that much. Now with this wood layer, just say wood, go to the label and say wood texture. Okay, there we are. And then image, sorry, edit, transform, distort. All right, I'm going to match this up as best as I can here. It's already kind of has the perspectival edges built in for me. All right, so that's kind of nice right there, all the corners. And right there. All right, now let's zoom in and check that out a little more. Fine tune it, make sure that we really have things matched up here in the right spots. Yep, getting there. Okay, I'm gonna turn that opacity back up. Right. Okay, back down. All right, now I need to trim out the part that would be, sort of clipped out by this concrete. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that right now. Go around. There, I got a shape there, and I'm just gonna hit delete. There we are. Now I can turn that back up. Now I can set this as let's see if I want to use it as an overlay layer or not. Yeah, maybe not. I'll just use it as normal. And I'll do that. Okay. Let's zoom out. Okay, so I got a couple of things. First of all, I need to do it over here, and then I need to wrap it up this way. All right, so let's wrap it up that way first. I'm going to paste this in again. And lo and behold, I'm going to go ahead and turn its transparency down a bit so I can see. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, Edit, Transform, and Distort. Right? I'm going to basically fit this in place. Try to make it so it looks like the wood just sort of wraps and turns a corner and wraps upwards from that sort of soffit condition and wraps all the way up. Isn't that nice looking? I think it's nice looking. Could be nice looking, right? Sort of a nice sort of Dwell Mag look. If you like Dwell magazine, I don't know, does Dwell magazine even exist anymore? I used to love Dwell Mag. All right, let's get in there. Let's get in there. This needs to go back just a little bit. All right, hit enter. All right, crank that opacity back up. Maybe try to match the other one. All right, I didn't quite match the seams there. You'd want to make sure you did that before you go too much further, right? So you don't break that illusion. Now these things are, the reason I wanted to do an overlay and maybe change the transparency a bit is because, some are darker, some edges are darker than others, right? So I'm going to go ahead and turn this down. This was at 60. I'll just go 60, straight up 60. 61 seems a little harder to remember. 60, there we go. All right. Again, I can always go back to this wood texture layer. And if I think it should be a little darker underneath there, I can go ahead and take my dodge tool and darken it up a bit. All right. Just along that edge, maybe. All right, to sort of paint some dark contrast. All right, and then I would do the same thing across. So I'd go across, I'd maybe look at this and keep it going. So look at this layer 4, I'm gonna duplicate it. I'm just gonna move it across that duplicate part, and then I just have to readjust it and maybe reclip it just a little bit. All right, so let's go edit, transform, distort. Maybe I cheat it over to the edge here a little bit, if I can, and doesn't look too stretched out compared to the other side. Let's try that. Have a little bit of a seam there. It's kind of goofy. All right, I'll try one more time here. Let's see. Distort. There we go. Just try to patch that up just a little bit there. All right, perfect. Good enough for government work today. All right, so now I just need to do the same thing. I'm going to paste another layer in. And I'm going to turn its opacity down. Yeah, to 60. Why not? Put it right where it needs to be. And go ahead and do that distort, edit, transform, distort. Do that all day, right? So I'm just going to start here, and then I'll just trim out that portion when I'm done. So it would end here, and it would end here, somewhere back here. Just need to make sure things are actually matching up here a little bit. It's pretty close, actually. Yeah, I like that. And then trim it out. Right, so I'm gonna go ahead and trim. Go all around this shape, the parts that I don't need. Delete. All right, so there, I'm getting there. Let's take a little bit of time. That underside looks a little light now to me, a little bright compared to the other side, so I might darken that up just a bit. Again, just sort of very subtly. Don't want to overdo it with the dodge and the burn. Right, starting to give some texture, some materiality here. Right, give some warmth, and with the wood, give some texture with the concrete. Right. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and save this for the time being. It's very much a collage, right? It's not photorealistic, right? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a sense of spatial quality. I'm going to give a sense of how it fits into the context. I want to give it a sense of scale with the scale figures, and even begin to sort of talk about, all right, here's where people will be walking back and forth along the street as pedestrians. Maybe I have people back here doing something else, right? Maybe I have somebody up here, right? Give it a sense of materiality and scale, right? Again, sort of thinking about some of the more important things than just sort of making a really pretty image, right? But sort of talking about some of these design decisions and how they work. Okay. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to stop